government to get civil servants back into work, but one union criticises plans as virtue signalling. Sky News has learned of a new investigation into the man suspected of abducting Madeleine McCann. Who've had coronavirus to donate blood plasma. Proud to play a part, but the appointment of Tony Abbott to a key Brexit role attracts further criticism and raises eyebrows from fellow members of the Board of Trade. Over a dozen arrests were made after Extinction Rebellion protesters blocked delivery trucks from leaving 2 newspaper printers. Very good morning, thanks for joining us. It's emerged that the government is putting pressure on civil servants to go back into the workplace in order to try and set an example for the wider public. The outgoing head of the civil service has issued a letter to all departments calling on them to increase staff levels. But the move has attracted strong criticism from the union representing civil servants. The FDA accused the government of virtue signalling and lecturing the private sector, when according to them, the public has moved on to a more practical way of working. Our political correspondent Kate McCann has seen the letter and joins us from Westminster. Kate, the battle to get back to the office continues.
It does, and it's something that Boris Johnson has repeatedly said he wants to see, not least because, of course, we know that in many towns and cities, particularly London actually, around the country, businesses really are suffering from the lack of commuters. People just aren't going out to get a sandwich at lunchtime, to do their dry cleaning, everything else they usually do in the week when they're working. And the Prime Minister and the Chancellor are really keen to try and stop that decline, to do something to get people back into those businesses and shore up jobs, actually, because the Treasury just can't keep supporting people ad infinitum. So that is one of the major parts of Boris Johnson doing this, because of course he can't control everybody else's behaviour, but he can control what the civil service does. So this letter, which has been penned by Alex Chisholm, the Chief Operating Officer, and Sir Mark Sedwill, the outgoing Cabinet Secretary, to all the permanent secretaries, basically says get your staff back into work now as soon as possible. In fact, it sets a target, 80% of staff by the end of September, even if that means some of them doing 5 days while others do 3 or 2 days a week back in the office. And the Prime Minister will be watching. This letter says that Boris Johnson will be looking at the statistics, making sure that as many people can be back in offices as possible, and they'll be comparing them across government departments to make sure people are doing everything they possibly can. And in that letter, those 2 civil servants say the Prime Minister is clear that getting more people back into work in a COVID-secure way will improve the public services we deliver and will also provide a significant boost to the local economies where they are based. It goes on to say departments which are still below their departmental constraints should now move quickly to seek to bring more staff back into the office. Now, it's not just about businesses in the local area. There is also an element of this letter which talks about staff development. It says that young people particularly are really struggling when it comes to home working. Many of them just don't have the space in shared accommodation to work privately, and others who don't really know as much as their more experienced colleagues are actually struggling to progress. So this letter is also designed to try and target some of those issues. But as you set out at the top there, this is also politically motivated, and that will be why there is already some criticism from the unions. Dave Penman, the General Secretary of the Civil Service Union, the FDA, has tweeted to say, let's not pretend this is about effectiveness and efficiency. This is about virtue signalling to a private sector which has already moved on. He's making the point that actually home working is very efficient. So this is something the Prime Minister is determined to push forward, but the unions look like they might also be pushing back.
Yeah, Kate, thank you for now. Elsewhere, Sky News has learned of a new investigation into the man suspected of abducting Madeleine McCann. The German prosecutor has opened a new case in which the man known as Christian B is also suspected of a child sex crime a month before Madeleine vanished in Portugal 13 years ago. And our crime correspondent Martin Bunt joins us now on the Algarve coast. Tell us more about this new investigation, Martin.
We spoke to the prosecutor in Germany yesterday. He's the man leading this investigation into Christian B around suspicion that he abducted and murdered Madeleine McCann. But what's going on in the background is a good deal of other work that's looking at other potential crimes that this suspect, Christian B, might have been involved in. And what the prosecutor told us was that there was an alleged crime here on Salema Beach about 15 minutes drive from where Madeleine vanished in 2007. An alleged crime in which a man exposed himself to a 10-year-old girl, performed a sex act in front of her. Now, the investigation at the time got nowhere. There were no suspects. But 3 months ago, when Christian B, his photograph was all over the world, all in the newspapers and TV across the world, and the girl's mother, they're a German family, she contacted the police, and that led to the re-investigation. This is what the German prosecutor, Hans Christian Wolters, told me yesterday.
Im Moment kann ich nur sagen, dass wir hier in Braunschweig, also bestätigen kann ich, dass wir in Braunschweig 2 Verfahren gegen Christian B. führen im Moment. Das eine ist das Verfahren Medi und völlig losgelöst davon, also ohne irgendeinen Zusammenhang, ermitteln wir noch in einem anderen Fall aus dem Jahr 2007 wegen sexuellen Missbrauchs eines Kindes. Auch da ist Christian B. verdächtig, sich vor einem 10 Jahre alten Mädchen, deutschen Mädchen in Portugal.
Clearly the authorities, particularly the German prosecution team in Braunschweig, but also Scotland Yard and the Portuguese police, seem determined to pursue Christian B and examine all potential crimes that they feel he might have been responsible for. But the bottom line and the clear message from the prosecutor yesterday is that although the investigation into Christian B around Madeleine McCann's abduction continues, the prosecutor, who asked for the public's help 3 months ago for vital evidence, still hasn't got the vital evidence he feels he needs to charge Christian B.
Martin, thank you. Back to coronavirus, the race to find effective treatments for COVID-19 continues to gather pace, with the NHS now urgently appealing for people to donate convalescent plasma. Darren Buttrick, the UK's longest-serving plasma donor, has made his 7th donation this morning and is urging others to follow his lead and give potentially life-saving antibodies to the NHS ahead of a possible second wave, as Becky Johnson reports.
Darren Buttrick is still working to regain his fitness after he was seriously ill with coronavirus. Back in March, he was rushed to hospital and told by a nurse he needed urgent treatment in intensive care.
I said, I don't want that. She said, you will not survive the night if you don't have this treatment with us.
He was given 15 minutes to call his wife and daughters before being sedated and put on a ventilator.
I can honestly say it was the worst 15 minutes of my life, having to ring your wife and hear her sobbing, ring your parents and they want to swap places with you. You cannot explain that feeling of, I may never wake up from this.
Since making a full recovery, he's been donating plasma so the antibodies he produced can be transfused to patients whose immune systems are struggling to fight the virus.
Great humbling experience to now be helping others and really, supporting the NHS in the fight against coronavirus.
Today in Birmingham, he made his 7th donation.
I definitely want to give back for what I was given. I was given a new lease of life by medicine and by people, and I'll never be able to thank them enough.
The NHS is urgently appealing for more people who've had coronavirus to donate plasma. A trial is underway to prove whether or not it is an effective treatment, with results expected by the end of the year. So far, around 16,000 donations have been taken, and around 230 people have received blood with COVID antibodies. But the NHS wants to get up to 85,000 donations for the trial and to be stored in case it's proven to work and there's a second peak. Anyone who's had coronavirus could have enough antibodies, but tests carried out so far show some groups of patients have more than others.
People who have been sick in hospital and men tend to have higher levels of antibodies. So appealing who've been sick in hospital for COVID and for men to come forward to donate.
Each time he donates, Darren hopes to help someone avoid what he went through. Becky Johnson, Sky News.
I am only too keen to help. That's the message from the former Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott last night after accepting a key trade role with the UK government. But Mr Abbott's controversial views and statements on everything from women to climate change have been anything but Boris Johnson, with the Labour Party saying yesterday evening that he was the wrong appointment on every level and had serious defects in his character. Shortly after the appointment, a fellow member of the Board of Trade, Anne Bowden, tweeted her support of a 2012 speech by another former Australian Prime Minister, Julia Gillard, when she launched an attack on Mr Abbott over claims of misogyny. Our political correspondent Nick Martin tells us more.
Tony Abbott's appointment to a top trade role is seen by many as hugely controversial, and that's because of his views. Mr Abbott once said abortion was the easy way out, that men were more adapted to authority. He also campaigned against same-sex marriage. Speaking before Mr Abbott was formally announced as a member of the Board of Trade, the Prime Minister chose his words carefully.
I obviously don't agree with those sentiments at all, but then I don't agree with everyone who serves the government in an unpaid capacity on hundreds of boards across the country, and I can't be expected to do so. This is a guy who was elected by the people of the great liberal democratic nation of Australia.
The Board of Trade will help Britain secure trade deals after Brexit. As a former Prime Minister of Australia, Mr Abbott has experience of trade deals, but his controversial views made it a hard sell for ministers.
He's a homophobe and he's a misogynist.
Well, he's also an expert in trade.
So one plays off against the other? Really? Is that really what you're saying, Health Secretary? Come on.
Well, no, what I'm saying is that we need experts in different areas.
Not be lectured about sexism and misogyny by this man. Not now, not ever. If he wants to know what misogyny looks like in modern Australia, he doesn't need a motion in the House of Representatives. He needs a mirror.
Julia Gillard, another former Prime Minister of Australia herself, said she stands by her actions.
I certainly stand by every word of that speech. I doubt that I'll ever be able to put it better in my life than the things that I said that day on misogyny. Of course, it's not for me to work out who should be the UK trade envoy or specialist. This is a decision for the UK government.
In a statement, Mr Abbott moved to try to justify his position on the board by saying, "It's important for the wider world that Britain make the most of its post-Brexit opportunities, and I am proud to be playing a part. My government finalised trade deals between Australia and China, Japan and Korea. I'm looking forward to bringing that expertise to bear as Britain works towards mutually beneficial improvements with its major trading partners." Senior LGBT supporters, including the actor Sir Ian McClellan, had written to the government urging them to reconsider this appointment, an appeal that fell on deaf ears. Some senior ministers had tried to urge the government to reconsider Mr Abbott's appointment, as critics believe he's not the right person for the job, that his views matter. Others say he's got experience and he will help Britain forge new trade deals after Brexit. In weighing up the argument, the government clearly believes that Mr Abbott is more of an asset than a liability. Nick Martin, Sky News.
Let's take a look at some of the day's other main stories for you. Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden says President Trump is unfit for the presidency over the latter's alleged mocking of dead American soldiers. This comes as President Trump was also accused of calling US World War I dead losers and suckers at an American military cemetery in France 2 years ago. Last night, Mr. Trump again denied those allegations, saying that they were just the latest in a series of false ones against him as president.
There is nobody that feels more strongly about our soldiers, our wounded warriors, our soldiers that died in war than I do. It's a hoax. Just like the fake dossier was a hoax. Just like the Russia was a hoax. It was a total hoax, no collusion. Just like so many other things, it's a hoax. And you'll hear more of these things, totally unrelated, as we get closer and closer to election.
The first pictures have been released of Jacob Blake since he was shot in the back 7 times by police in Wisconsin.
Are you able to hear me clearly today, sir?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you.
He's seen on the lower right of the screen here taking part in a legal hearing over a Zoom call during which he pleaded not guilty to charges relating to events before he was shot. Extinction Rebellion protesters have blocked roads outside printing presses owned by Rupert Murdoch. The News Corp sites in Broxbourne, Hertfordshire and Merseyside produce copies of several national papers. Campaigners said that they wanted to prevent titles including The Sun, The Times and The Daily Mail from reaching the shops on Saturday. The Home Secretary, Priti Patel, took to Twitter to criticise those protests, saying, "This morning people across the country will be prevented from reading their newspaper because of the actions of Extinction Rebellion. This attack on our free press, society and democracy is completely unacceptable." Travellers arriving in Scotland from Portugal will have to self-isolate for 14 days under new rules coming into force this morning. Both Scotland and Wales have added the country to their quarantine list, while England and Northern Ireland have not. The new rules went into effect as of 4 a.m. this morning. Do stay with us here on Sky News. Next, what lies ahead for nightclubs, with thousands of jobs at risk if they don't reopen soon.